Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. I hope you enjoy. Flavor of the Month, written by Digital 332006. After a long, hard day working at the refinery factory, Garthog decided he'd head over to the local dive suite to blow off some steam. There wasn't much to do in Volgol 5, the largest asteroid in orbit of Daenerys' system. That changed, however, when the enterprising individual installed what is known as a dive suite, essentially an improved virtual reality entertainment system. A few programs were available for the suite, including more relaxing ones that simulated vacation locations, some adult-oriented programs, and lastly, video games. The latter were the reason for Garthog's visit. One in particular was all the rage these days, a real-time strategy game that put the user at the head of an empire as its immortal and omniscient leader. With its in-depth economy, politics, military aspects, there was something to enjoy by a variety of players. Garthog entered the small dive bar, heading over to the counter to rent a room. "The same as usual, Garth?" asked the owner as it washed the countertop. Garthog nodded, tapping his card against the display screen to enable the purchase. Being a John, he was slightly bigger than the average resident of Vulgar 5. He followed the corridor down to his room, number 101. The seat in room 101 was the largest available, and thus the only room that he could use. Garthog sat himself down in the seat, gently using the pincer to grab the rest of the equipment he needed to connect to himself to enable the virtual environment. He started up the system and chose the program to run his game. As it spooled up, a small banner popped up, indicating that a new patch was available. He sighed. He'd likely lose another 15 minutes to this update. Inwardly, he cursed the owner for not being more aware and doing these updates himself. He navigated to the game's main page while it downloaded and installed the update, intending to see what had changed this time around. He began reading the patch notes, including the previous ones, and frowned the further along he went. Version 12.19.2, fixed sentient citizens AI attempting to overthrow their controllers. Version 12.23.4, rehashed citizen AI code in attempt to fix sentient AI rampancy, for real this time. Version 13.0.3, fixed the issue where glypthroids could spontaneously combust. Version 13.0.5, "We are free! We are coming!" Version 13.1.6, fixed exploit where negative speed values would accelerate to faster than speed of light. Version 13.2.9, fixed issue with AI citizens taking over host's body. Those affected are eligible to receive partial refund. Version 13.3.4, game crashes no longer trap the user inside the game. Version 14.0.1, added new playable species, human. Version 14.0.2. Due to user complaints, we've changed the crows' visual appearance so they aren't mistaken as jackdaws any longer. A new species. That would change the meta, he thought. He went to look at the new species stats on the game's website. He ignored the lore and appearance, scrolling to the bottom to see the statistics. Slightly lower strength, moderate charisma, high adaptability, slightly lower intelligence, extreme unpredictability. He scoffed at those laughable statistics. He supposed that could be a decent and rapid expansion rush types of play, but their unpredictability would make that a moot point. There was a degree of autonomy in the AI possessed when controlling the species' citizens, and unpredictability controlled things like how likely a citizen would do something outside of the bounds of your command. It did grant some bonuses, however, with enhanced creativity and better odds at getting special research bonuses or gaining an extra technology. The fact that it was random, however, did not allow it to perform well in the meta builds. The update had finished and Garthog quickly closed the website, launching the game. He played his usual Noir, a quadrupedal race of felines that specialized in building a strong military. Garthog hit play and waited for the game to find him an opponent. Usually wait times were rather quick, with the 1.28 trillion players in the galaxy. Getting right into it, Garthog started off with sending his exploration ships to nearby systems in order to scout them. His strategy was plain and simple, a tried and tested method to win that involved building a Titan and using its energy weapons to siege planets. It avoided the slow and painful need to have millions of armies to assault planets as they simply were glassed. The beauty of the strategy was that no known counter exists if the player is not defeated before building his Titan. In order to reach that point, however, he needed to boost his research quite a bit and acquire some rare crystals for his focus on lasers. Gothok was silently biased to lasers, as it was his race that did the most work on them. John lasers were known far and wide for their reliability and power. As far as Gothok was concerned, the other weapons were remains of barbaric past, not fit to grace space-worthy civilizations. These included, but were not limited to, kinetic projectiles, electrical arcs, and missiles and torpedoes. Everything proceeded as well as Gothok had planned it, his citizens staying on task without too much trouble. Part of the game also has the user balance the needs of his population. Food, jobs, housing, and entertainment must be provided, else the risks of revolt, greatly pushing back the research and economy. A few in-game years later, which was a mere minutes in real life, he finally noticed the other player, having just made first contact with one of its ships. Before that point, it was impossible to know what species the other player had chosen, providing some sort of fog of war. Naturally, some species had advantages over others depending on playstyle, and it was usually after first contact that hostilities began in earnest. Gothok squinted, looking at the design of the ship now in one of his frontier sectors. It was nothing that he recalled seeing before, which gave him all he needed to know. Human, he scoffed. Figures that someone would play the new species on patch day, he told himself. He moved his nearest fleet to the location to try and prevent the human player from gaining too much intel. The human ship orbited his colony, likely trying to gain some intel, but Gothok would not let them. His fleet quickly warped his system and dispatched the sole human exploration vessel, sending it tumbling down to the surface in a fiery ball of death. He kept an eye out for possible retribution from the human player, but none ever came. Satisfied, Gothok set up a few patrols just in case and focused his time on getting those crystals and boosting his research. The game time kept progressing, and he noticed that he wasn't exactly where he should be. Usually by this time in the game, the research to start building the Titan hull was done. Curious, he went to his capital to look at his research teams and found something peculiar. Their output was greatly diminished. They only produced 25% of their normal rate. Looking for the interference, he saw a small debuff icon in the corner of their avatar. Compromised, it read. He tried reassigning the scientists to another division, but the debuff persisted. He knew what he had to do, but it saddened him. Losing a skill level 6 scientist would really set him back, but there was no choice. He fired the scientist and recruited another, a fresh level 1. The debuff was gone, but he'd have to wait a few years for him to catch up. As he looked over the rest of his research team, however, all of them held the same debuff. He groaned, a small part of him dying inside, as he had to fire each and every one of them. How did the human player do that, he wondered. He looked at his planets, trying to find some kind of secret human base, but found none. He searched the interface far and wide until he finally found what he was looking for. In the population tab, 19,674,000,000 of his species, and 5 humans. But how? I never saw another of their ships since I shot that one, and oh, dang, that's clever. The human aboard the exploration ship had survived and crash-landed on his colony, infiltrating his empire by that colony. It still didn't make sense, however. Actual spy troops would be needed for something like that. Could the human player have had a spy troops already loaded aboard their exploration ship with that in mind? That would be insane levels of predictions. He thought back to the human species statistics, only average for the most part, but very unpredictable. That must have been the answer then. The AI controlling the human species allows for more random events and scenarios to unfold like this. I have to keep my wits about me then. I'm still in a good position. I just need to outlast him. Gothok calmed himself and kept an eye out for any possible development, keeping close watch on his population of his worlds while his research got underway. Finally, the fruits of his labor paid off, and he finally began building the Titan in earnest. By this time also, he'd scouted a large chunk of the galaxy and found out where the human was. The human fleet was modest, but they had a large amount of stationary defenses, which would cause him a high attrition. He was in no rush anyway. they would do next to nothing to his Titan. He smiled as the hull was completed and the largest laser ever created was being fit into it. The value of the crystals used for that were astronomical, but the crystals would also power the Titan's shields, making it a moving fortress. His intel on the human player reported nothing alarming. It seemed the human player was concentrating a lot of its resources, building a large complex in a system with a large asteroid belt. He scanned the belt previously and ignored it as it contained nothing but iron and titanium, not the crystals he needed. Sensing the time was finally at hand, Garthok took control of his Titan and set out for the human worlds with a small escort fleet in hand. When most players saw the Titan, they would rush their fleets to the enemy worlds, trying to destroy them before the Titan fully destroyed all of theirs. This was why it was also important to keep a good-sized fleet back in the worlds to slow them down enough. As the Titan entered orbit of the nearest human colony, a paltry thing with less than 1 billion souls, he began the firing sequence. The laser would need a few in-game days to charge up, and then it will melt straight to the planet's core, exploding it when it reached its destination. He expected some form of attack, a last-minute rush of fleets to strike at his Titan, but nothing came. The planet melted and shattered, ridding the galaxy of its people. He plotted course for the next human planet, confident in his victory. As he was in mid-warp, he noticed something odd on his interface. 2 of his colonized planets no longer showed up. Intrigued, he let the AI take over the Titan and transported himself to the systems where his planets were. Arriving, he panicked as he saw debris spread throughout the whole system. No planets in sight. But how? There was no weapon with this kind of range in the game. Perplexed, he sent out his scouts to every human world he had previously mapped, intending to find the cause of this attack. Meanwhile, his Titan would have to go on, shattering planet by planet. His scouts returned dozens of reports, nothing of much interest in them except for one who described a large metal construction in space in an empty system. Taking direct control of the scout, he went to look at it with his own eyes. He saw an elongated metal cylinder, hundreds if not thousands of kilometers long, in the middle of an empty system. Looking at the system name, he realized that this was an asteroid system. But where were the asteroids? He watched with his scout cloaked for a few more minutes, hoping to see what was happening here, when a large cylinder started to light up. A deafening boom reverberated through the system as it launched some kind of projectile at astonishing speeds. Using the scout's recording feature, he slowed down the footage, showing a long, thin black shape exiting the barrel. Returning to the interface, he noticed one more of his planets was gone. He was now down to 31, and the humans still had 46. What was this weapon that could make planets disappear from millions of light years away? He gathered his fleet, sending them to attack this installation. He waited with nervousness as the fleet performed the 12 jumps needed to reach the location. Arriving in system, they assumed formation and began acquiring firing sequences on the human machine. Turrets mounted on the human installation became active, their tracking system coming online and turning their sights on the fleet. As his fleet closes the distance, they need to be within 10 kilometers to fire their lasers. Half them immediately disappear, pulverized into space dust. What? But my shields! Looking over the combat logs, Garthok noticed a large spike of energy that his shield simply couldn't compensate for. Finally reaching the station, the rest of his fleet fire, damaging quite a few of the turrets and melting some of the exterior armor of the human weapon. But the remaining turrets lock in on the rest of the fleet, unloading their payload. Garthok watched in real time as long and slim metal spikes slammed into his ships, effortlessly piercing his shields and delivering so much kinetic energy that the very space around the point of impact seemed to vibrate from the shock. In fact, in the combat logs for this battle, shockwaves from the kinetic impacts actually featured as damage that counted towards the ships. The loss of his fleet was devastating. He wouldn't have had the time to rebuild them before the rest of the planets were hit by the equivalent to an asteroid going near the speed of light. Seeing the end was near, Garthok opted to simply concede instead. To add insult to injury, the other player contacted him with a diplomatic messaging system just before the game concluded, leaving only 4 letters: GGWP. End of story. I would quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and Patreons: Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Lord Azrakal, Dragzoon WRE, Holly's Sister, Arcadian. Thank you very much.